So first of all, I want to say this is a really special place. This is the first time I've ever been here, which is clearly a gigantic mistake on my part. The number of companies I've met in the last half an hour and the quality of the things that people are working on is incredibly impressive. And so there's a lot of people here that deserve a huge round of applause, and thank you for bringing me here. Thank you. So I want to start with maybe a little bit of not talking about payments. You know, when the internet got started, I spent a lot of time saving money to buy really crappy modems, like 4.8, 9.6, 14.4, was it, did it go to 28.8, 36.6? I can't remember the exact progression of the modems, but I do know that for years as a child, I mowed yards almost solely to go buy a modem and get access to information faster. And so the problem I was trying to solve was access. There's this big, beautiful world that has apparently all the world's knowledge through a computer that I can get access to. And the reason I did that is because I wanted access to that knowledge. There's a lot of companies in this room that are solving an access problem for other companies. Most of us, though, are actually more focused on our experience with the internet now as a function of experience and availability. Its presence is implied. When you got here, the Wi-Fi was just supposed to be open and available. When you got to your hotel, same thing. As soon as you pass 10,000 feet on an airplane, it's supposed to work. And there are a tremendous number of companies solving experience problems, making difficult things easy to use. There's certainly a unique set of dependencies in financial technology because there's not really one company that solves all of these things all at once. My name is Ben Milne. You can find me on Twitter. I'm fairly available. My email is also b@dwala.com. If there's anything I can ever do to be helpful, please shoot me a note. Response times may vary, but I do tend to respond at some point. Dwala as a company has been through a number of changes, and I want to talk through a little bit about what it is that we do now and how our customers use our product. We started as a consumer product that you sign into or you download, and today that's just not what we do. The thing that we started out to build was building the ideal way to move money, and what that's really evolved into is building the ideal API to move money. And I know APIs are nothing new to this crowd, so when you think about what we actually do, businesses sign in to use our tools to move money or collect money, or software companies integrate our APIs to move money around between banks. It's a notoriously difficult thing to go get access to the banking infrastructure through a bank. It's not impossible, it just takes time, money, and resources. It also has been reserved in the past for really the privileged. You had to socially understand how to manage that conversation to get through the bank. What this actually looks like in practice and in production is there is a ton of referees around the country that are referees for, say, college basketball games. And they have paychecks, they need to get paid. The software that actually manages the payouts to all those referees uses Dwala software. Marketplaces like Goat use Dwala software to ensure that their sellers are getting paid quickly. And since Goat gets to actually use our platform without ever paying transaction fees, costs are always incredibly transparent and we can scale with our business in a predictable way. It's all just a bunch of fancy words saying you tell us where to get money from and where to put money and where to send money to. We're an infrastructure for getting money between two bank accounts, many times through a software provider. This has driven us to focus more on APIs than anything else because enabling software companies is a pretty incredible opportunity because they can build so many more great user end experiences than we ever could. Again, working in financial technology, we really have to think about what the role of software is and what the role of banks is. If we think about what banks do, banks hold assets, money, and sometimes other types of assets. They also make loans, and they also sell other products and services. Non-banks probably have a great opportunity selling those other products and services. Non-banks can also make loans when they have the proper licenses or proper partners. Non-banks do not hold assets. Some pretend to, but they don't. They have a bank holding the assets for them. So either by regulatory mandate or by just the complexities of removing them from the system, we have to accept that banks are going to be a part of our future moving forward when it comes to how technology interacts with people's assets. There's a great opportunity in not holding assets, but in building better products and services on the loan layer and on the products and services layer. When you start thinking about how to integrate code into systems, it might not be reinventing the systems and putting APIs in front of these things. It might be in just making them accessible. Doing instant loan origination is something that now is very possible. That wasn't possible 10 years ago. Getting access to the entire banking infrastructure with an API that actually works in a compliant way and in a secure manner didn't exist 20 years ago. When you think about a software developer's ability to go get access to an API to move money between any two bank accounts in the United States without ever talking directly to a bank, is a fundamental shift in the way that software is being built. I know there's a lot of great developers in the room that probably think about their code as poetry. I think about it as opportunity. And the opportunity is to simply provide simple tools to our customers that they want to use to either solve an access problem or an experience problem. How many people in the room know Twilio well? So it's got to be a room where almost everybody knows Twilio. You know, the ability to send a message to almost any phone in the world with a line of code, think about the difficulty to do that 20 years ago. You would have to go get a number of contracts with aggregators, put up a bunch of money, convince everybody, fly all around the world, maybe spend a few years doing it. Well, you go to Twilio now and you can get done in about 5 seconds. That's an incredibly empowering thing when it comes to building better software that interacts with real people. This is a way to create a customer in Dwala's APIs. Now, one of the things that Dwala used to do with its kind of branded product was we open accounts at about 1 account per minute. Well, when some of our new customers come online, they might be opening 15 accounts per minute or 100 accounts per minute. When they all of a sudden get to think about how to open those accounts in a compliant and fast way, out of the box without managing or building an infrastructure that has to scale with a financial institution, but have a partner that already knows how to do that, it helps them scale faster and helps them iterate in production. How many people ever set up a credit card gateway 10 years ago or more? So none of you are missing out. In that world, you needed a merchant provider, you needed a software provider, you needed an additional bank, and you also needed many times to post collateral. You didn't get your money for maybe 7 days, and after you went through all this brain damage, you got the luxury of losing about 3.5% of your money. You don't have to do any of that with Stripe. You can be up and running accepting payments at a hackathon. The barriers to getting our products to market and what they do are having major ramifications in all markets, including financial technology. This is a framework called Silhouette. It gives you the ability to store a message in a distributed blockchain-like ledger in plain text perpetually. It's immutable, and it's free. It's hosted by the community, something that never existed in the past. And if you have a piece of software that needs to move money between banks, this is what that looks like with Dwala. The ID on the top is the authorized account, and the receiver's ID simply could be an existing account number and routing number or one that's already in the system. You designate how much money from and to where and in what currency, and the money simply moves. No batch files, no figuring out returns and corrections. You don't have to figure out how to build a multi-dimensional ledger that can update multiple currencies in real time and distribute it across multiple AWS instances. You just tell us where to get the money from and where to send the money to. Guys, this open markets, it creates unprecedented opportunity for software developers who no longer have the social connections to get into the bank, but have the intellect to build the software. And if you need proof of that, just look in the App Store. These applications are dependent on one another, and certainly when you take the APIs and the access those APIs out of the equation, this shit doesn't work. It doesn't work. The APIs are oxygen to this software. And when you think about building new products and new opportunities that may even be upending markets in their own right, like Robinhood, they still need access to the old school information and the old school infrastructure. They still need to communicate with real people. They're bringing new business models to market, leveraging efficiencies that didn't exist 10 and 20 years ago. Uber is one of my favorite examples of this. If you think about the time and cost to set up a network of on-demand cars and drivers, it is a maniacally expensive thing to do from scratch. Thinking about how to do that 20 years ago, I don't know how many hundreds of millions you would need to fail at doing that. If you're a software developer today, you just include a line of code. You say, I want my customers to be able to get a car on demand virtually anywhere in the country, and now virtually anywhere in the world. which completely changes the experiences that people can provide because the access to the infrastructure that has been built is so easy now. A single API to get a ride anywhere in town, a single API to send a message to any phone in America, and a single API to send money to any bank account in America. You never have to talk to a telecom company, you never have to talk to a bank, and you never actually have to talk directly to the company who owns the cars. Again, the efficiencies that are created here are insane. A single API to do anything, anywhere, whenever you want. So I give these examples as companies that are providing access to an infrastructure through an API. This means that software companies building great experiences don't have to rebuild the infrastructure, nor do they have to rebuild access to the infrastructure. Each layer makes the next layer more efficient, and all of a sudden, we all come up together. I made this point before, and I think it's a dangerous point to make in Silicon Valley because Silicon Valley is a privileged place. But that doesn't mean everybody in here has all the money they need for every great idea. It doesn't mean that if we went to a bank, we would know everybody in the bank that we would want to talk to. Now, getting these types of contracts in the environment that we work in financial services was really a privileged thing. You had to know who to talk to how to them, how to dress, who to get the appointment from, how to actually leverage nuances between their assistant and them. You don't have to do that anymore. You just get the API. So while it took me 2.5 years to figure out how to legally do and get into the market, that time was spent doing research, meeting with banks, basically trying to convince everybody around me that if we could just get it into market, it would be really great. So 2.5 years of my life, and really, truly on the brink of bankruptcy at the time, just to get the idea into market. The software companies that we're working with today are into market in 30 days or less. So let's just say you are significantly better at this than I am, which you absolutely may be, and I'm sure many people in the room are. And you could do this in a year. So if you could do it in a year, still, what is 11 months of your life worth to you? Just because you choose to use an API rather than build everything from scratch. What if you spend that 11 months in market talking to your customers? How much less money do you need to raise? Does it change the size of your engineering team? I think it means you get into market faster, you spend less money, and you actually have a better product because there's an infrastructure provider as a partner that actually wants to help see you grow. The other thing that's really special about APIs as opposed to direct relationships is that, and when I mean direct relationships, I mean if you were sending text messages and you built a contract with an aggregator, or you are submitting files through the Fed and you had to negotiate with a bank to go get that, is that the rules of participation are built into the software. When you are submitting a batch file, the number of shenanigans that you can accidentally set off by putting the wrong information or the wrong code in a batch file is pretty significant. An API, you just get a failed response. You get an error. The software companies that are granting you access to the infrastructure are also providing the coverage to make sure that your software is working correctly, managing a number of moving pieces behind the scenes. Maybe that's compliance, maybe that's security. Maybe that's simply the ability to scale your transaction volume from maybe a few hundred transactions to a few million, which for anybody that's built a scaled messaging system knows that's actually a relatively difficult problem to solve across distributed systems. Before these APIs as infrastructure came along, this is how you got access to the infrastructure. You just did PowerPoint after PowerPoint after PowerPoint in any organization that would take your meeting. Now, plug and play is pretty amazing because you apparently have all these infrastructure providers actually alongside you here where you can walk across the room. Again, a very, very, very good problem to have, but not everybody has that access. Great reason to be here, but also it is something that now, instead of doing the presentations, you're actually just getting access to the APIs. Maybe it's 1 in the morning, I don't know, and you just get to work. If what you're doing doesn't work, who cares? You iterate and you move forward, but when it does, you're getting access to the systems with service providers that are not going to let you do something maniacally stupid, which means you have more time to be creative and build software. I think the automation that APIs are giving way to is incredibly important. As we all know, automation is not artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of companies that use the term artificial intelligence that are actually doing automation. And what automation does is automation just distributes costs across very big networks to the point where the cost to support things is virtually zero. And that starts to show up in the products and services that are built on these infrastructures through their APIs. I'll give you an example. How many people are familiar with Cloudflare? So if you're not familiar with Cloudflare, this is a company that you should learn about and get intimately familiar with. They do a number of things right. One of them is not charging for bandwidth. They charge for features, which is something that I think is incredibly unique in their space. But Cloudflare provides DDoS protection for a company of any size. Now, actually protecting yourself against a DDoS attack 10 years ago was incredibly expensive. You'd have to invest in boxes that would basically burn incoming requests and isolate which one was a bad request and which one was a good request. For free, you can now implement a technology through Cloudflare that actually stops bad packets from getting to your core server and having really the costs associated with that be absorbed by you. The fact that whatever we pay Cloudflare is easily margins smaller than what we would have paid any other provider in the past to do this for ourselves. Instead, we leverage Cloudflare's global network that basically stops assholes from attacking us all the time, and we do it for maybe a few $1,000s a month. Now, DDoS can be a very expensive thing, and it's not the only thing that Cloudflare does, but Cloudflare uses rules and automation to basically route the packets. And so when you think about Cloudflare as one of our providers, they're also looking at the packets that are going over the API and routing bad data out, which benefits everybody in the ecosystem. Civ Science is another really fantastic provider that provides machine learning services that help businesses protect themselves against fraud. One of the reasons it's so special is because it's not on-premise, so it's very easy to integrate. And when you get it integrated, you're actually taking advantage of the bad behavior they've seen across all instances of where they're installed, which is an incredible footprint at this point. So to get real-time machine learning across the entire internet against any type of transaction that is actionable and virtually free, that's a really incredible piece of software and one that we can all benefit from dramatically. You know, Dwala's models are more about how we queue up multiple data sources for an analyst to take action. So when we're partnering with somebody and we're taking action against things that we know to be quite nebulous and problematic, they never have to think about them. And so this is one of those things that a lot of the technical problems have been solved, but there's still a lot of great ideas that are stopped because we as people kind of get in our own way. And the social complexity of finance are much harder than the software. There's a lot of really cool things that we can do technically that aren't available in the marketplace yet because we as people haven't got our heads wrapped around them yet. Real-time transfers, for example, the fact that money doesn't move through our economy instantaneously and everybody doesn't have access to it right now is an incredibly frustrating thing for me because the technology exists. I know because I worked on it. A number of great ideas in this space die at the hands of people, not due to the difficulty of bits. And so for those of you that are building companies, I want to encourage you to recognize that when it's not working because you can't get the meeting, or the one person you think you need that you just can't seem to get over the hump with isn't taking your calls. That's normal. We all go through it, and that's part of life. The software is the easy part. Talking about the processes that we used to have to go through, the benefit is there's just not as many processes anymore, and not as many meetings. For example, to get access to the banking infrastructure, this is what the process looks like in a very condensed version over, for me, 2.5 years. For our customers that we're now doing the same thing for, this is what it looks like, and it takes weeks. As we focus on sort of building and helping others build great software and technology, this is what this looks like in commerce. This looks like a software company that wants to build a marketplace. Their app is designed to actually match really niche shoe buyers with people who have really unique shoes. It's called Air Goat. It's a really great experience, and if you want maybe like an original pair of Jordans, this is a great place to go get it. Their core competency is their love for sneakers, not how they get money between financial institutions. That's what we help them with. Another example of where the software is being used is with Wonder Capital. Wonder Capital's expertise is in finding people that are building solar projects that need funding and finding investors in those solar projects, not how they need to interact with the banking infrastructure. So we help them collect investor money and actually bring it to the investment vehicle and deploy it in the world. Seamlessly behind the scenes, most people might not recognize that we're there, but their product, had it taken another 2 years to get into market, how would it be different? How much slower would they be iterating? Abe is another interesting company that does conversational insights. I'm sure I slaughtered the way that they would say it, But as I use the application, it can look at my finances to tell me what I should be doing with my money in a conversational way. Now, their core competency is creating the insights, not figuring out how do I do DDoS protection or how do I interact with the banking layer. It becomes what APIs do I need, what infrastructure do I need to select in order to achieve my end goal. Current is a really cool company in New York building a really great new banking experience for essentially younger generations. Their expectations of a financial institution are different, and there are financial institutions that are doing this in other countries, but the bar is relatively high in the United States and it's difficult. So when a software developer needs a way to actually store money in a software application but move money between US financial institutions, again, it could take years. $20K on the proposal, dude, good job. Doing business right during the talk. No, I love it, man, close. I should have put a slide in here that was build and convert the funnel, because if you don't do that, you're screwed. Kudos, seriously. You know, it's a good time to point out that, you know, the banks and the APIs and how they work together, enabling new forms of commerce, are really the most important thing from my perspective, not the actual finance. You know, it's not making loans. It's not. The new opportunities and the new experiences we're creating are in a number of different types of applications other than just the core business of banking. And the core business of banking is going to expand, but will exist. And so the last thing I want to leave you with is if you're building the next great anything, whether or not it's a marketplace, an escrow platform, maybe it's a new bank, maybe it's a new business unit inside of a bank, and if it has a need to move money quickly in a very simple way, we're here to help. That's what we do. If you want an app that moves money, like go download Venmo. They're really good at that. And as our business has grown and matured, like many of your projects probably have, this is what we've arrived at, where our fit is in the market, and we love being in there. If you have any questions, again, that you don't want to ask here today, my Twitter account is bpmillen. I will do my best to answer them. I know we've got a few minutes for questions if you guys want to do them, and if not, it's totally cool. But since we've got the time, are there any questions that anybody has? Just raise your hand and just yell it out. All right. Oh, got one.
Sure. Hey, how are you finding dealing with the banks on moving personal information through the wall?
Let me try to repeat the question to make sure I've got it right.
Yeah.
How are we dealing with the banks?
Yeah, are you finding resistance, and how are you overcoming it in terms of large established financial institutions sending you personal information as part of the package and API calls?
So I don't know that the banks themselves are as concerned with probably the regulators about personal information being passed in API calls. And the fact of the matter is that the personal information that's being passed always needs to be passed with the owner's permission, and there needs to be an audit trail that the permission was supplied. And so the very kind of boring answer is that's sort of a solved workflow for a relatively mature company working in finance. But for new companies getting launched, you should just keep in mind that don't move people's information around without their permission, because if you do, you will not exist. If your startup thinks you are unregulated but touches the banking system, then you're wrong. It can just get very expensive quickly. Yes, sir?
How much is your platform connected with blockchain?
So how much is our platform connected with blockchain? We specifically don't use Bitcoin's blockchain for any specific business purpose for ourselves. But we do interact with a number of companies that are tracking assets in multiple blockchains. That might be Bitcoin proper or a side chain or a completely different type of project. What is unique about the transaction or the exchange of an asset is at some point, if you're a US citizen, money probably moved between one bank account or another. So there's a clearing and a settlement ID in association with the transfer of the ownership of that asset in that blockchain. Think of us as one of the providers for that clearing and settlement ID, where they're actually tying our system to the blockchain to record that the actual money moved to purchase that asset. And we think that's really cool. All right, I think we got time for one more if anybody would like to. Okay, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.